travel trailer loans can be complicated and a pain in the butt, especially if you're a first time buyer. And when you go look online and do your research and your homework, you either have influencers that are experts that are breadcrumbing you, or you have a lot of fake or false information that's not really helpful. Well, in this video, I'm going to make you the expert, whether you come by from a dealership like me or make a purchase private party. Whether you're buying new or whether you're buying used, you're going to feel confident in 2026 and beyond. Welcome to HB RV Lifestyle. I'm John Livingston, aka the Honey Badger, here to give it to you straight and transparent about the RV business. And today I'm going to break this video down into 3 segments. We're going to talk about the terms of the loan, we're going to talk about interest rates, and we're going to talk about a little bit of the interest between prime and subprime, or good credit and bad credit, because it is possible to buy a travel trailer with not so good credit. Now, if you're wondering who the heck are you and how can you give us this information, well, if this is the first time you've seen our videos, I actually have over 15 years of experience in the RV industry. I've worn, as I say several times, a lot of hats, from the finance manager trying to get loans bought to running dealerships. I've been on the manufacturing side. I've been on the parts side. I've been a service technician. I've been a porter. Basically, I've done everything except own the actual dealership. All right, let's get started. Terms of the loan. And when I talk about terms of the loan, I'm going to talk about it in 2 phases. We're going to talk about the length of the loan, and we're going to talk about the possible down payment. And you're probably wondering, what do you mean by possible down payment? Well, I'll get more into that in just a moment. But let's talk about the length of the loan first. Now, it can be as little as 5 years. It could be as much as 20 years if you're going to a dealership. Let me explain that. First off, to get a 20-year term at a dealership, 90% of the banks want you financing over $50,000. Most travel trailers are priced underneath that. Most folks are financing less than that. In some unique cases, if you're financing over $45,000, you can actually get a 20-year term as well with 1 or 2 banks. Credit unions, which represent and make up just over 35% of the RV loans in the United States, do not have 20-year terms except for 1. That's right. Most of your credit unions are going to be an average of 10 years. So when I do quotes, when I sit down with people on a blind quote and say, look, this is going to be what your payment's going to be around, I usually quote a 10-year term because we don't know if we're going to a credit union or a bank. Now, most folks take a 15-year term if they're financing over $25,000. So key point there, for a 15-year term, you have to finance $25,000 or above. Now, there are unique cases where you have a Camping World who advertises a Coleman 17B for $12,999. And what happens is they put a disclaimer saying that they're going to get you a 7.74% rate and a 180-month term. Well, how can they do that? Well, in special cases, in a very, very sliver, pinky nail, like tip of the pinky nail circumstance, they can team up with a bank and actually, how do I put this, participate in the loan. So it's very, very, very low chances that's ever going to happen. It's more of a hook to say, look, I can come have you buy a travel trailer for $89 a month. That's a hook to get you to come into the dealership lot. And even though those terms are possible, 99.9% of the time, that's not going to happen. More than likely on a trailer that price, you're going to have around a 10-year term. Not a problem though. The difference between a 10 and a 15-year term on that is not going to be much payment-wise. And you can do an RV loan calculator, which I'll put one in the description box of this one, or of this video, I should say. Sorry. I'm all gushered out today. Now, phase 2 is we're going to talk about possible down payment. Now, what a lot of folks don't understand is when you go down to a car dealership, a lot of times there's already built-in down payment when you buy a new car. That's called a factory rebate. All right. There are also buy down programs where you could buy down the interest rate. There's a lot of complicated things that occur when it comes to a car. Even cars can be complicated. But the reality is most people go walk into a vehicle purchase thinking, I'm just going to put zero down. Now, in a travel trailer, I'm going to tell you that 90% of the time when I get a loan for somebody with either not so good credit or even good credit, credit unions and banks require some sort of down payment. And the most common minimum required down payment is 10% down. Okay, so if you're going and buying a $20,000 trailer and you're going to buy it private party and you're going to go through a credit union, generally they're going to want $2,000 cash down in order for you to have some skin in the game. Let's remember, this is a toy. This is not something you're getting in a car and going and driving to work to make money. This is to go enjoy vacations, build memories, things of that nature. And as I tell people all the time, the reason why RVs are a lot different than cars is because the first thing to go in a bad economy, especially during the Great Recession in 08, 09, is the toys, the power sports, the boats, the motorhome, the travel trailer, the toy hauler, the fifth wheel. Those are the first things to go. And then the house and car last. So that's why it's so much different. And especially because it's the highest risk loan. All right. So now let's talk about interest rates. All right. Travel trailer interest rates in 2026. And towards the end of this segment, I'm going to give you my prediction for what I think rates will be in 2027 and 2028. So stick around for that. All right. So whether you have good credit or bad credit, we're actually going to cover what the rates are going to be. Now, interest rates, especially on any type of RV loan, including travel trailers, is determined by three things. Number one is the amount financed. So if you're financing $10,000, you're going to get a higher interest rate than if you're financing $30,000. Okay. The second thing that actually affects an interest rate is the percentage of down payment. So if you're putting 10% down, you're going to get a higher interest rate than if you put 30% down. Now, you notice if those two things, there's actually a balance to it all. So when I talk to consumers about that, I always say, look, these are the three things that affect it, but there also is a balance. We have to find that happy medium sometimes. And the third thing is your credit history. Not necessarily just your credit score, but your credit history. Let me give you an example. Great example here, okay? I had someone with a 740 FICO score putting 20% down on a $30,000 travel trailer and got a 8.49% interest rate. I had a person with 820 FICO score that was buying a $40,000 travel trailer, putting 10% down, that got an 8.99% interest rate. So the difference was, actually, I'm not sure what the difference was, but reality is the bank has an algorithm that actually determines a credit tier. So you could be a 740 FICO score and we run you through the system, you could end up at tier 1, and you could be an 820 FICO score and be a tier 3. Now, those are rare cases, but again, it's really based on credit history and algorithms. We can no longer do what we did in the past and say, if you're over 800, this is going to be your interest rate. We now really have to submit and get it done unless we're using a credit union, which most of the time, guys, especially here at the dealership I work with, we quote credit union interest rates because they are higher than the banks right now. Okay. And I'll get into that a little bit later. All right. So I've also seen it where with bad credit, I've had somebody with a 595 FICO score putting 30% down, have a 15% interest rate. And I've seen somebody with a 640 FICO score putting 10% down, have an 18% interest rate. So it's not as as black and white as people want to make it out to be on the internet. Okay. What I always tell folks is if you think you've got good credit, to basically get an idea of what your payment's going to be, use an RV loan calculator and calculate it at 8.49%. So if you get an 8% rate or 7.74 or 7.49, it gets better. While if you get an 8.99 rate, the payment doesn't look outrageously too high. You're shopping within your budget. Okay. And I would do the same thing on the bad credit side. I would do the loan at 17.95%. So if you get a 12 or 13 or 14% interest rate, you look like, hey, my payment dropped. While if you get a little higher rate, it doesn't affect the payment as much. Okay. Now, at the end of the day, this is a guideline to help you. Okay. Everybody that walks in the door, unlike a car dealership, when you go walk into a car dealership and everybody's got a 740 FICO and above, Toyota Financial or Toyota Motor Credit, whatever they call it, has a standard program rate if you don't take the factory. So if you don't take the factory rebates, you don't take the factory discounts, they give you a buy down rate. Boom, boom. And it's only through Toyota Motor Credit or Nissan Financial or GM Financial, whatever the case may be, right? Now, that being said, there is no such thing in the RV industry. There's no such thing as 0% interest. There's no such thing as really buying down the rate. I mean, you can, but it's super expensive and costs you a ton of cash. What I recommend to everybody that has bought since August of 2022, and I've said this on other videos and on my podcast, is by 2029, 2030, interest rates will come down enough where it'll be worth the process of refinancing your RV loan, whether you bought a toy hauler, a travel trailer, fifth wheel, motorhome, etc. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, guys, and this is the last thing I'm going to say on this before my prediction, keep in mind too, interest rates are high, dealer profits are small. When rates go down, dealer profits go up. Okay. So you guys that are buying or have bought since 2022 up until August of 2022 through 2026 are still going to get a lot better deal than people that wait for interest rates to drop. So just keep that in mind. Now, as far as interest rates in 2027 and 2028, my prediction is they're not going to go down at all in the RV industry. Now, we can make this political if you want, but President Donald Trump does not have power over the Fed. And he has begged them to drop interest rates. Dropping interest rates would cause inflation to skyrocket. It would get out of control again. Unfortunately, we're still 2 or 3 years out from anybody dropping interest rates below 6%. That's kind of where we're at. I think interest rates are still going to hover from 2026 to 2028 from 7.5 to 9.99 for good credit. And I think they're going to hover between 16 and 19% for bad credit until something breaks. And I think it'll break 2029, 2030. All right, let's talk about the difference between new and used. This may be shocking to you, but the differences between new travel trailer loans and used travel trailer loans is very significant. Let me explain. So first off, if you want to put only 10% down, you want to put the minimum required down payment, it is easier to get a new travel trailer loan than it is used. And it doesn't matter if you're buying at a dealership or private party when it comes to used travel trailers. So when we look at the used RV market in general, okay, and we see a really nice high quality travel trailer that's pre-owned, that's half the money of a new one, it's very attractive. So let's say that the new one is $30,000 and the used one is $15,000. You're like, oh, I can put $1,500 down on that loan and go get let's say you're buying at private party and you go to your credit union and say, hey, I want to buy this travel trailer. And they go, great, we'll give you a check for $9,000 for it. And the way they come up with that is a formula through JD Power. Now, I'm going to tell you that the super majority, not every lender, but the super majority of lenders do not allow you to put ads or click all the options to make a value. Now I'm going to explain and go deeper into that in another video that you can see later on this year. But the reality is that JD Power is base book when it comes to RV loans. And a lot of times your credit unions are going to finance between 65% and 100% of the retail value without any ads. There are exceptions, folks. I'm not saying there's not exceptions. But in that case, you're looking like, well, it's a $15,000 trailer. That means I got to come up with $6,000 down. So just because a used travel trailer is less money doesn't mean it comes with less down payment. Now, there are times where something is priced correctly. Like a lot of times when you come down to the dealership I work at, a lot of times you can put 10% down on a used unit because it's priced properly within the guidelines of the bank or the lending institutions, okay? But a lot of times when you go private party or you go to a dealership, they're trying to get the maximum amount of money and you're trying to pay the least amount of money. And somehow in a way, that's all got to kind of figure itself out. Now, to give you an idea, if I remember my statistics correctly, and you can correct me in the comment section, over 85% of travel trailers that are used were purchased on a loan. When I explain that to people that are selling their used RVs, they think I'm just smoking something. But that's a reality. Not everybody's got $20,000 in cash that's lying around that they're just going to give for a toy. So a lot of times they finance the toys. That's what good sound finance advice would sound like. Now you look on the flip side, let's say you got $3,000 down in that scenario. That $30,000 new travel trailer is easy to purchase with 10% down, even though it's more money. The other significance is the terms of the loan can be a little different, especially when you're buying an older travel trailer. Now, I'm going to get more into older RV loans in another video, but right now, let me cover some of the basics. So when you're buying something that's 10, 11, 12 years old, a lot of times that 10-year, 15-year term shrinks to 5 to 7. So a lot of times what ends up happening is I'll get customers that walk on the lot that have a little bit of education and they, from on RV loans through the internet, and they come in and they want a $20,000 motorhome. Well, a $20,000 motorhome is a 2006. It's 20 plus years old. And they're like, hey, I'm going to get a 12-year term and I'm going to put $2,000 down. Well, then we say, hey, by the way, the bank approved it at 6 years with $9,000 down. So just because a used travel trailer is cheaper doesn't mean the payment's going to be cheaper unless it's a newer pre-owned travel trailer. Okay. Now, new standard stuff, right? New is pretty easy and significant. Now, the other big difference, and the last really big difference between them, is the interest rates can be higher on used travel trailers. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but when you go look at a credit union and you go look at their interest rate page, they do have a difference between new and used. When you look at banks that through, let's say, a lending through a dealership, sometimes we can get the same interest rate. A lot of times we end up having to use a credit union. So credit unions are actually a dealership's best friend in a lot of respect, especially on used units, because again, they're a little more flexible with things. So a lot of times, like when I have somebody walk in that wants to buy, let's say, the little Nash travel trailer I have in stock here, a lot of times we're going to our 3 main credit unions because they're going to do that age of a unit. Now, in conclusion to all this, there are exceptions to every rule. What I did was give you all the basics. Now, if you guys want more information on stuff that I've talked about when it comes to RV loans of any kind, I got a playlist right there they can click on, and it's got a bunch. I think there's like 30 videos that give you a bunch of information. So until next time, just remember that RV stands for toolkit and sense of humor. Have a good one.